Hi, I'm Chris Biro, and I'm going to talk to you about the two most important components of getting a behavior. The first being willingness, and the second being ability. Now, it takes both of these, so it's hard to say one is more important than the other, but it takes both of them. It doesn't matter how able the animal is, if it's not willing, nothing's going to happen. And it doesn't matter how willing the animal is, if it's not able, nothing's going to happen. So you have to have both of these to get an animal to do a behavior for you. All right, now let's start out talking briefly about willingness, because there's only two pieces to willingness, right? Two elements. The first being a compelling interest that the animal is willing to work for to achieve that benefit. And typically that's going to be food. Sometimes it can be in or out of a cage. Sometimes the animal wants to go in, sometimes it wants to come out of the cage. Sometimes it can be for social and personal attention. Sometimes it can be for hanging out with other birds. But most commonly we're going to work with food items, a favorite treat, for instance. The second element is a belief that the animal's own behavior can achieve the item of its desire, right? So it's not enough to have a compelling interest. You must also have a belief that your actions can achieve that compelling interest. Okay? There's lots of things we want that we don't go out and pursue because we don't believe we can get them. We only tend to pursue the things we believe we can get. Okay? And that's why it's important that the animal believes it can get what it wants through its own actions. Now, this is a very big issue for most pet parrots, because most pet parrots live in a cage and have no control over their life whatsoever. They have a lot of things they want and they can't get any of it through their own actions. They are totally reliant on you to give them most of the things that they want. So when an animal learns that it can get something it wants, when it comes to believe that its own actions can cause things to happen that it would like, that's very powerful for it. All right, that starts to open up the possibilities of the first element, and that being a compelling interest. That gives them the opportunity to discover more and more compelling interests that they're willing to work for. Okay, so don't be surprised if in the very beginning there's only a few things you can get them to work for, but later, as they become more confident in their own ability to gain things they want out of their life, you'll find that they will work for more and more things. Conditions, want to sit and look out the window, want to spend some time hanging out with you or out of the cage, whatever. All those things can eventually be used as part of your motivation tools to get an animal to do the behavior. All right, so that's the willingness component. The ability component consists of four categories, okay? Four elements. The first one being, I usually start out with physical definition. At least that's what I call it. The configuration of the animal's body is important to its ability to achieve a particular task that you're asking it to do, right? If you want to teach a parrot to fly, if you've clipped its wings, you can work all you want on flight training and it's not going to happen because the animal doesn't have the ability to do the behavior because its physical definition has been altered. Likewise, of course, you can't teach pigs to fly. You have to, that's not something that you've done something to the animal. It just never came with those physical abilities to achieve that. So obviously we need to select our behaviors according to the animal's physical definition, its ability to do that based on its bodily configuration. Okay, so that's physical definition. The second category I usually bring up then is physical fitness. Okay. Obviously, if you want to teach a parrot to fly and fly outdoors, for instance, high level of physical fitness is very important to its ability to survive if a hawk should pursue it, right? Obviously, if it's not in good shape, a hawk's going to find it. First off, the hawk's going to notice it because it's not in good shape, and then it's going to have an easy time catching it. Now, of course, there are other things that physical fitness can relate to. Just flying in the house, for instance, or running around and climbing can exert a certain amount of energy that some animals, some parrots in particular, who sit on a perch all the time, simply do not have that physical fitness to be able to do that. This is usually an issue when people are first starting to teach a parrot to fly. They will get enthusiastic, they will think this is lots of fun, and they will push the bird to fly several times. In the very beginning, it doesn't take very many repetitions to overcome the animal's physical fitness level, and now it's got very tired and very sore wings, and suddenly it no longer wants to participate. Right? Now you've affected its willingness. So physical fitness is a very important one to consider, especially when you're training flight. A lot of times people think that a bird that flies indoors, flies across the living room, or even flies across the yard is in great physical shape. By comparison to a bird that flies outdoors, I mean truly flies outdoors, where it's doing laps around the neighborhood and this type of thing, physical flying in the living room or across the yard is a little bit like you walking out down the driveway to check the mail. That doesn't qualify you or prepare you for doing marathons, right? That's the same kind of flying that a bird faces when he's flying outside. That's a good comparison. Walking out to check the mail is like flying in the living room or across the yard. Normal outdoor flying that a wild parrot or a sport flying bird like you see me doing with my birds, that's like running marathons, maybe 2 or 3 of them a day even. Right? So there's a huge difference in physical fitness level. Okay, so the next one is physical coordination. Okay, and we all know that some behaviors take practice, right, to develop the ability to actually achieve it. It's not enough to understand what you're trying to do, like throw a basketball through a hoop. You get the idea, you want to toss the ball, you want to go through the hoop. And that's easier said than done until you've had a lot of practice. But even professional basketball players can't toss the ball through the hoop every time because it takes a high level of physical coordination. Flying is one of those things that takes a lot of physical coordination. If you think about it, the bird is essentially coming to a hover and stop directly over the perch when it lands. And likewise, taking off out of a tree can require immediately dodging or twisting to avoid branches and other obstacles as the bird's trying to take flight. So a high level of physical coordination is also very important if you're training a bird to fly, especially if you want it to fly outside where it has the potential of coming into contact with such animals as hawks, right? Because the animal is going to need to be able to evade that hawk with a high level of physical fitness and a high level of physical coordination. And this takes a lot of practice, right? All right, so the next one is criteria. It's very important that the animal come to understand each of the elements of the criteria. By criteria, we mean what are the things, the conditions you want the animal to do in the behavior. What are the requirements of that particular behavior? Do you want the animal to stand on one foot? Do you want it to lift a foot? Do you want it to wave? Do you want it to turn around in circles while it's standing on one foot? Hopping, of course, whatever. All the different pieces of the behavior that you expect it to do needs to be understood by the bird. And that, seeing as how we don't speak parrot very well, is sometimes challenging. Now we're going to teach you how to do that using a clicker to mark a moment in time so that the animal can identify exactly why it's getting a goodie. That is a form of communicating the criteria to the animal. It's very effective. People who train without clickers often argue that a clicker is not necessary, and they're actually correct. It's not necessary, but it is necessary if you want to be efficient and quick with your training. I don't care who you're talking to, a clicker or a bridging signal like a clicker is extremely effective, much more effective than trying to train without such a bridging signal. It makes a huge difference. And if you practice with your animals and try one and try the other without it, you will see a big difference in the speed that the animal learns what you're trying to teach it. Anyway, there we go. So there we have the 4 elements of ability, being the physical definition, the physical fitness, the physical coordination, and the criteria. And the 2 elements of willingness being compelling interest that the animal will take action to achieve, and 2 being a belief that its actions can achieve the desired goal. And there we go. So in the future, in these videos, I will be highlighting which element we are working on, both from a ability and or a willingness. We're not always working on willingness. Sometimes we've got that covered. Sometimes it's a ability only. Sometimes it's a willingness only. right? So as we do these videos, I will be pointing out which section we are working on. It's good for you to come to understand that, because that'll help narrow your training down so that you're much more effective. All right, again, I'm Chris Biro, and I hope you enjoy and learn something from our videos.